welcome to 20 Questions with Kim and Joe. I'm Kim High from
Uh,
Her Tribe Within.
and I'm Joe Busuttil from the Secret Men's Business. And today we're going to be talking about equality.
It's a
And
big
so,
topic.
you and I have been talking about this offline about, um, what it's like to be. I guess that this is what this segment's about, isn't it? It's like what it's like to be a woman, and for you to understand what it's like to be a man. But I think what we've
Yes.
realized is that men do get off a bit easier, don't they?
Well, I think that's the generalization, isn't it?
It is a generalization.
But I also think that there needs to be a discussion about what women can do to speak up and to feel their worth and their place as well. It takes two to tango, doesn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
but I also think that we're learning now to allow men to do the same thing,
Mm.
because a lot of men have not. If we think about it, right? Think about your dad, and I think about my dad. Like they weren't really taught. I don't know about your dad, but my dad wasn't. They weren't taught to talk about emotions or to think about
Oh, my
things.
dad always says that. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like there's so many men out there that are just holding it together.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so it'd be interesting to see what we talk about today.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent.
are you,
Who's going first?
well, you can go first because I'm into equality.
It's true equality. We don't reverse discrimination, do we? Um, okay, well, I'll just open up first of all. I think I would like to hear my first question. How does it feel as a man to be pushed into this mold? Pushed into this, I guess,
Like the macho mold.
yeah, or not so much the macho mode. It's more of the power, leadership, ruler of the roost mold. Like the world's going to crumble without a
Yeah,
man at the steering wheel.
you're talking to the wrong guy.
Right, but you've heard people talk.
Yeah, yeah. Like
How
I think that I've been lucky because I was the first child in my family, like, and the first grandchild. And so when my mum and dad went to work, I stayed with my grandma and my aunt, and I had lots of female energy. So I never really went into that space. And thankfully, my family doesn't like portray. They do role models, but they don't push it like
Yeah,
other cultures.
yeah.
Um, so I to be honest, I now that I'm thinking about it, I felt really anxious at school when I went to an all boys school.
Yeah, yep.
Like there was this anxiety to
Expectation.
be, well, there was an expectation that you could play sport
Yeah.
like really well, and so
Yeah.
I really do that. Like I played, but I didn't really enjoy it. There was an expectation that you back then anyway that you didn't do certain things, like certain creative things.
Yep, yep.
Right, so there was that. I mean, I do remember I wanted to go to a private school, but my mum and dad said no. They
Oh,
said they couldn't afford it, and so I remember getting a job at 13 and paying for my own school.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I remember like that was like so that was sort of like being I felt like I had a responsibility at 13, but I'm really thankful of that experience because by the time I turned 17, I was ready to leave home.
Yeah,
And I
okay.
had all the money and everything, and I had the confidence.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a tough lesson because I had to like, it was expensive.
Yeah, yep.
I'd have to do my homework and then go to the supermarket. And so,
Wow.
um, in regards to other guys, I think that there's a pressure from society, but also a pressure from other guys.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Like,
what I mean.
yeah, like if you're in a
Yeah.
footy team, I guess there's a bit of pressure there. But I don't know. Part of me has a belief that that's changing.
You do?
Well, a little bit. Like, like for example, I know like I've got a lot of like straight friends who love me and I'm a gay guy. And like in the early 80s, that wasn't the case. I was hiding it, but now they don't see an issue. So I think that it's changing in regards to what men think. I think that there's an evolution taking place in regards to all that. It's maybe slow and maybe small, but it's taking place.
Well, that's exciting news to hear because I feel like you would have had to manage this expectation. We talk about gender roles, and I know that they're fluid and everything's changing, but I have this sort of, I know what was expected of me as a woman. So I wonder if, as a man, you had this
Mm,
pressure that you were going
yeah.
to lead the world, you were going to have the high powered job, you were going to be the bankers and the politicians and the.
No, well, like I was the first boy, the firstborn. I was the first to go to uni. But also, the funny thing is that that pressure that I didn't feel. I felt a little bit unhappy or disgruntled that I didn't feel that I fitted in.
Yeah, okay.
But I think because of the job ethic and because as soon as I turned 18, I went to uni in another, like in Geelong, actually, where you live.
Yeah.
And that sort of like taught me to not worry about that.
Yeah, okay.
Because, my family is traditionally like a blue collar family.
Mm.
And I wanted to be white collar. See, so
Yeah, okay.
when I got into uni, you know what my dad said?
No.
Like, why would you want to do that when you can come work with me? So, like, it's that mentality where they didn't
Yeah, yeah.
understand. So, my dad's dream was for me to get a trucking license.
Wow.
Rather, and when I got into uni, like, no one said congratulations. So it was this
No,
weird
what are
thing.
you doing?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, your turn. So, how do you and your tribe assess the double standards that are being thrown on you in regards to things like age? So like a man can be fine older but a woman doesn't, or things like assertiveness. A man can be assertive and be seen as strong and a woman is seen as bitchy, or even like sexual appetite. A man could be seen as sowing his wild oats while a woman would be seen as a slut. So like within your tribe, and even if you've gone to talk to your husband, I guess, or men, other men, how have you audited that double standard?
That's amazing question. I love it. I wish I had thought of that for myself. Um, I, it's something that I'm going to take back to the tribe and we are going to talk about because I don't think we talk about it enough. I think we actually just accept it, which is
Well, I was going to say, do you feel sad? Like when do you ever
when you say it
notice,
out loud like that, I do feel sad.
like, do you feel sad when you see, like, I feel sad when I get really emotional when I hear about sexual abuse,
Yep.
like women being abused because men feel entitled or validated to do what they want. That makes me feel sad because it's like I always try and think, are you walking around looking over your shoulder? Like it must be this thing because there's double standards.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely there is. And the thing about walking around looking over your shoulder, I mean, that was the big conversation a few years back, wasn't it? Don't
Mm,
dress that way or you're asking for it. And I guess what really frightens me, Joe, is that there must be men who actually see women dressed like that and think we are asking for it. How scary is that?
yeah.
Like it's sort of you hear it as a conversation, but it actually is. That
I
some
think that there's
men
more than you.
actually do believe that
There's
we're
probably more men than you think, I think, and that's I'm sorry about that.
yeah, well, that's apology accepted. Thank
Because
you.
there are a lot of guys that I believe wear masks, and but underneath the mask is, it's a totally different story.
Yeah, yeah, and
You know?
that was a big question that I had about this. Like, it's all well and good to say there are men like that, and it sort of is a surface thing. But do you like? It feels like there are men that truly, down to their core, believe
Yeah,
absolutely, wholeheartedly that a man is more capable than a woman at
yeah. Well,
everything
that's a
and
cultural
has the
thing. I mean, I
best.
think culture is a big part of that.
Oh
Then
yes,
you've got like if you talk about Australia, then you've got sort of like Aussie, sort of like we're talking about our dads, but the cultural thing is probably the biggest thing. Like a lot of religions and cultures, like but don't believe women mean anything.
yeah.
Like, some of the Muslim countries see women as, nothing. And if they do something bad, they get killed.
Yeah, I know, but
So
then there's
there's
also
that.
but on a gentler note of just like the blokiness of Aussies without culture, religion, or
Yeah. It's
anything
just
like
it's
that.
just the entitlement. But can we just sort of do you mind if you
Go
just
back to
try
the
and
double standard.
I want you to answer it a little bit deeper, like about like I want to know, like, do you when you say you ignore it, like how does that feel?
Yeah, so I guess you
Have you had an experience yourself that you
well,
can sort of compare it to, like your brother or something?
well, I don't have a brother that does anything similar to what I do, but I have certainly worked in areas where there are more men than women,
Mm,
and I've found it quite uncomfortable that brotherhood when you're a girl in a brotherhood, of not being able to speak up or like exactly what you said, like my behavior being a little bit watched with a bit more of an intense filter than perhaps they were watching
mm.
each other. They could get away with whatever, but a woman couldn't. But I think what it comes down to, you said to me, how do you manage that? How do you speak?
Yeah, because these are certain things. Like, I'll give you a quick example. So, my sister, right,
Hmm.
had to get married by 18.
Or what?
Well, it's just part of the, it was sort of like, it wasn't arranged or anything, thank God. She ended up marrying my best friend at school.
Yeah.
And they honestly fell in love. But it was like, that's expected. Well, for me and my brothers, that wasn't expected.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's this whole thing about, the boys go and play and do what they want. Well, the girls have to get married, and if you're not married, you sort of like you get each year becomes more damage.
Yeah,
And
so
so there's that. I think up to my sister, go, oh my god, how do you cope with that?
but I suppose that there comes a point where you have to take a bit of responsibility for the choices you make. And I know that culturally it's a huge pressure and
Yeah,
society puts a huge pressure,
huge
huge,
pressure.
huge, huge. But I would like to think that we're now dawning on an age where we
Yeah,
could potentially be starting to say, well, you know what, I'm not going to. I saw a post the other day on Facebook about not having to put the dishwasher on only once. You can put it on 3 times if you want to clean it
yeah.
just as you
I mean,
want.
going back to that thing, I
Follow
think
the
that
rules.
some people, unfortunately, some cultures are still strict like that, and I think what happens is that some women have to end up not like disconnecting from their family. The family
In
disowns,
order to go against it. Yeah, and that's
yeah,
very
like the family disowns them.
yeah, yeah, that is very sad.
So
And I suppose
that's
it takes
that.
one generation to turn around and stop it, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
anything that we pass on epigenetically, someone's got to be the full stop and say, "Well, no, I'm not going that
yeah.
way." But that
So
takes a lot of courage,
it
and women
does.
don't have to have that. And
So
that's
what about like? Do you mind if I like explore? Like, what about like with actors, right? So a woman actor who's old is thrown away, while men that are older actors become seasoned. So what is that all about? And like, why do we see that? Why do we allow that to happen? Like, if you think about the old actors,
mm,
like when someone gets, it's getting better. I have to admit, it's getting better, but
definitely getting better.
there's not as many roles, because we still haven't given. We're just starting now to give women leading roles. It only just started to happen because of Me Too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of movies recently with beautiful.
Well, that's because Hollywood is responding to Me Too. So I don't even believe it's real. I believe it's just they're just doing it as a token, and then we'll go back to the old
Okay.
thing, which annoys the shit out of me.
Well, I
Like,
hope you're wrong, but
I hope I'm
yeah,
wrong
because
too.
and I think that reflects too, Joe, this whole thing about equality, I think comes from that. I mean, if you look back to how we've struggled for independence as women, for land ownership, for marital rights, for being able to say no to your husband if you don't want to sleep with them, all those sorts of intricate things. But it all came down to, I think it all came down from us having to be the, the pretty thing on the side, didn't it?
Hmm.
So I guess if you're defined by your looks and your appearance for so far back, and in Hollywood, you think about the women of Hollywood.
But I know, but
Um,
we're the ones that go to watch it, so it's all got to do with us. We're the ones that make the change because we can say, like Wonder Woman, right, was one of the biggest grossing movies ever, right? Not
mm,
as big as like Avengers, but it was a big movie. They didn't expect it to make that much money, so that really shook everyone up.
yeah,
Going, oh my
right.
god, this is a woman's movie. No one wants to go and see a woman's movie, but people do want to go and see that because people are ready to explore. People want more, but
Yeah,
unfortunately, some of the old school people that are in charge don't see it that way. They're a little bit old school still,
yeah, yeah.
you
But if
know?
you talk to any woman who's in a job about her physical appearance, where that's like the majority of focus, they have an element of sadness about it. While they are beautiful and they are successful, I think there is an element of sadness when you can't just be a master of your work and be, I guess, acknowledged for that. And you can
Yeah,
be that till you're 100 as a brilliant actress. I
I
mean,
know.
Julia Roberts, I mean, she's not old,
I know, but
but
I
she's
agree.
brilliant. She's
But
Charlize
you do
Theron.
realize that I'm talking about old. I'm talking about Sean Connery, talking about Richard Attenborough. They're seen as icons, but we don't really have many women except for Maggie Smith. But anyway, let's move on because
Meryl
it's
Streep. Yeah, okay. um, all right, my next question. We sort of ticked off a couple of mine through that conversation as we spoke before. Okay, here's a very controversial question, I suppose, and it's kind of a reflection on women too. One of my tribe said, "Why is this conversation ongoing? What, from the perspective of a man, and I know you're a very lovely,
I'm
open-minded
lovely.
man,
That's in
but
itself is not
let's
that
go
in
with
itself is not a quality.
let's
Lovely.
go with let's go with the men who hold a little bit more passion on the other end of this spectrum. What do
Why
you
is this still going on?
what do you think they perceive that we aren't doing that isn't enough or isn't right? Or what do we need to change? How do we
Well, I
change?
think you and I talked about this offline, but firstly, I think that, and I know that you don't fully agree with me, but I firstly believe that we're in it right now. So,
The
you know,
change.
well, we're in a big part of the change. Like
Yeah.
when you think about the suffragettes and all that, trying to get voting rights and all that, that was each of those steps were things. I mean, the same thing happens in the gay movement. The same thing's happening now with blacks. The same thing's now happening with transgender. So we all have to go through these things. The unfortunate thing is that men were always freaking at the top. That's the unfortunate thing. But
Mm,
history dictated that. Like, you know, if you and I could go back in time, you know, there were times when women were in charge. You know, there were times when, but then I think that men become uncomfortable. Like I watched, like what's it called, the Vinci Code, right? I know it's an old film, but in that movie, like you know, Jesus was married to a woman, and she was supposed to take over the church and be the head of the church, but the
oh,
church got freaked out and they actually killed her.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So like, you know, that I think that's been around for a long time. Like this whole thing about women have been like witches. And if we look through time, right? So there's that. Right. So we're in it now where we're talking more about it. But then I really do believe it's got to do with upbringing.
Yes, yes, you have
You
mentioned.
know, we've got billions of people on the earth. And
Mm.
so if we think about some countries, how do we change, you know, if we're doing it now, but how do we change the Middle East?
Yeah, well, that's
Like,
right.
how do
Yeah,
we change that? The Middle East won't even let a woman go out without her covering her face.
yeah, yeah.
So where's the
And
equality there?
and as much as it's all about, upbringing and that we can, like, as parents, our generation can potentially change that, but there needs to be a cultural shift in our generation to
Yeah,
demonstrate
and
that
there is
too.
one. There is
So
one now.
that's
But you know what? Isn't it
starting.
sad that it took Me Too for people to, you know, all that time, all those women were saying nothing. Like
About being oppressed or about being not.
about being sexually abused and with like with Me Too. Like
Yeah,
it
you're
took
right, and
it
that's terrible because they obviously
It
didn't feel
is. They were
like they were
scared,
ashamed.
or they, you know, what you said earlier. I think that there's a part of men and women, everyone accepting their role. So in some way, it's good that we're now shaking it up a bit because, you know, if you think about it, a lot of those guys would have got away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I go with my next question because you are so close to it, and I know it's your turn.
Yeah.
But you talked about witches, and you talked about
Yeah.
this this thing about
I love
the
witches. Yeah.
Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
I have this real question: do you believe that men actually are capable of relinquishing their control of those higher end positions of the world? Like, I feel like some men feel unsafe when a woman
Well,
steps
I
up.
think I think everyone can do that. I think men and women can relinquish the control because that's
But not
human
if they've
nature. We
had it
have
forever.
No, I know, but that's the thing. I think what happens is that, you know, if we go into our humanity, we can do that,
Mm.
right? Because in reality, right, this is my add-on to the question, is that don't you sometimes wonder, like, if we just connected with our humanity and we forget power, like why aren't people like helping the poor people? I don't understand.
Oh,
We've
true.
got billions of dollars and we've got all this abundance, and yet we still have
People who
poverty.
earn enough to save
So
a third world
it's
country.
it's linked. That's linked to that. Like the people that, you know, for example, don't save the poor people are the people that are making money from the poor people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a power thing. So I don't think, you know, I think there's only a small amount of people that are in power, a tiny amount.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so those people are mainly men, and I think they're ego driven. If you're going to go down into smaller, you know, smaller men, like,
Mm.
you know, go down where there's not billionaires,
Yeah.
I think that some men do have a change when they have a breakdown or they have something happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but the reality is that I don't even know. I'm just guessing. Don't Can you imagine what it's like to have $1 billion? Of course, it's going to go to your head.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, think
Of
about this. Like
course.
when you watch The Crown, right? I know
Yep.
that's my favorite show.
Yep.
Like Prince Philip has someone that puts earbuds in his ear. He won't even do it himself
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he's so powerful.
So it's a
So to
belief
relinquish
or is it?
that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I guess there's this constant conversation happening amongst our tribe about men being uncomfortable with successful women, women of power, women who earn more than them.
Not
Um,
all of them, but I think yeah, some of them do. I agree.
yeah, and I think in some industries, and I actually had a little poll, but it never really went anywhere. So I'll have to put it up again about the sorts of industries where women are more accepted in higher roles than
Yeah,
in
I
others.
think it's up to do with the man because of man will feel emasculated if a man knows who he is,
Or
he's
maybe
not.
emasculators is where we need to go.
Well, but again, if I was married to someone that was a billionaire, I would love it. But some men
Exactly.
feel like they're being emasculated and they don't have an identity. That's why some of those men,
Do
you
you
know,
think that's part of the problem?
yeah, it's because they don't know how to just see it as they don't see it as anything. Like they worry about what other people will think.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all. Like probably deep down, they wish that they didn't care. But
Yeah.
then when you're living in a world like that, right? Remember, it's not our world.
Mm-mm.
It's when you're living in a
No,
world
we
like that, then there's more social gatherings. So there's going to be more questions. Like, again, sorry if I keep going back to the Queen, but imagine Prince Philip, right? Who was a very strong man. He was the admiral of a navy. He
yeah.
had to give all that up so he would follow the Queen. That was huge for him. It took
Mm.
lots and lots of years for him to reconcile that.
Yeah.
So, but when you think about it, I think that's up to the individual man. I mean, if a man can see it as a global thing and it's an advantage to
Yeah.
be with
Yeah.
a woman that's rich, why would they worry? But some men worry.
I know. When I think about it, like we we sort of need to learn from each other, don't we? Like women have been living with men who earn more than them forever, and
I
we
know, but I've got a bit of a secret. This is
what's
what I
that?
really think is because the powerful men, right? This is just my little theory. The powerful men know that there's a whole world that is open to them. And so I think the powerful men feel uncomfortable knowing that women can go into that world.
Because they might find the truth.
Well, I just think that there was, for many, 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 many centuries, we've had these men groups,
Yeah. Yeah.
men only, like, so
Yeah.
a lot
Okay.
of men
Yeah.
feel
Still a few of those in
uncomfortable.
Melbourne, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot of men feel uncomfortable knowing that, if men feel entitled, then they're worried probably that women will feel entitled, which is so stupid.
It really is because we're all just human beings, aren't we? So
I know.
that sort of sounds as if they've got something to hide, doesn't it? If they don't want
Well,
women.
it just means that I think they've got inbuilt sexism.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all. Like, you go to, like, I was visiting my mum at the hospital and you could see it. Like, the doctors talk down to the nurses.
Yes, I know. And
Like,
then on the flip side of that, like I know that it's quite hard to be a male nurse in a female environment. So we have got both
yeah.
things in there,
Yeah,
haven't we?
but see, but that man would have to have dealt with being teased or bullied or
By
whatever
other
because
men.
like,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah, yeah,
stupid.
yeah.
Like, it takes a brave person to do something and not worry.
Yeah, yeah.
It takes a brave person to say, I don't care what you think.
I'm just going to be what I am.
And
Yeah.
that's what I hope. That's why I talk about the parents. I hope that that's what the new generation of kids are doing.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Because if you totally believe in who you are and your capabilities and your
But does that, but that,
that
you
can
know,
only
the
change.
whole color thing,
Yes.
the whole color doll thing that's been happening.
Yeah,
Do you think
doll.
that's, well, how kids now can play with dolls if they're boys and girls, they're trying to give
Oh,
kids.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you see that evolve? Like, cause you're in it, like, is that working? How do you see that?
What, that my children, that my son can play with
Yeah.
dolls and my daughter can play with
Yeah.
trucks?
So like, you're the proof because now we're seeing that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
kids,
true, true.
so are you seeing it as a good thing? Are you noticing a difference?
Um, I think so. It's funny because my son is only 7, so he's still little, but I can still see him turning to see what other people are thinking when he does things with his
Yeah.
sister.
So where would you have picked that up? Like,
Well,
so
I don't know. It's certainly
you
not
didn't,
from here.
yes. So
He watches Barbie with her on the couch some days, and we say, "Yay, that's brilliant!" You
so
know?
that's the weird thing. Where did, like, isn't it funny? Like, you didn't say anything. Your husband didn't say anything.
No.
Did you get it from TV or did you get it from other? It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's a
One
boundary, isn't it?
statement,
And if we don't
bang.
know where, it's all well and good for us to have the best of intention, but if it's sort of crackling in the atmosphere, how do we cut that off at the pass?
Well,
Because I
part of me thinks that even though I don't understand it yet, but I really do think that the salvation of all this is going to be transgender community. The
yeah,
transgender community is going to explode, which it is, and then
yeah,
all of a sudden that revolution is going to impact us.
because it's going to make
Well,
male or
because
female
male and
obvious.
females don't matter
Doesn't
because
matter.
males are females and females are males in that generation.
Yeah,
And females are, calling themselves lesbians because they go out with a woman, but they're really a man. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
sort of like multi-layered. And once we understand that, it's going to open our eyes
Well, I hope so. I hope
a
so.
lot more. Can
But
I
it's
ask you another
yeah,
question?
it's your
So
turn. You actually have a chance
I
to
want
say
to know what it felt like. I don't know if you actually ever think about this, but once upon a time, women were actually bought property. You know, a wedding certificate is actually a proper is a document saying that the man owns you, right? So I know that we don't see it that way now, but at the moment, right, if you get married under certain traditions, you're still that's what it's saying. So how do you feel about like how do you feel about that when you compare it to like stories like the Bible or fairy tales, which in fairy tales and in those stories that's what it's sort of saying, right? And now here we are. So
Yeah.
how do you feel that we need to get rid of all those stories, or do you feel that you know how do you feel about all that?
It's so difficult, isn't it? So with my daughter, I remember there was a time where she got into the Disney princess thing, and it used to turn my stomach. Like, why do you need a man for the happy ever after? And then Frozen happened, where Elsa.
Does she talk about a man?
Does my daughter?
Yeah. So
No, but the stories,
right, right.
Cinderella meets the prince at the ball, and everybody always ends up being something. I mean, even in Frozen,
I
Anna
would
has
say
to Anna falls
all the
for
princes are
every
gay,
single one.
right? All
Yeah.
the princes are gay.
Well, let's hope so. Um, that would make it a better story. But yeah, so it's definitely a cultural thing. But I think I've said to you before that my daughter hasn't attached to those stories at all. Like, she's not going to be a princess. She's not going to marry a man. She's going to wait for her best friend to marry a man, have a child, break up with him, and then move in with her, and that will be her child.
Yeah, come back to me when
So
she's 13, doll.
yeah, I know, but it's interesting though, isn't it? So where does it come at 13? Like, is that just because of
Well, it's hormones, and
hormones?
also everything is Instagrammed.
Yeah,
Like the thing that when so how old's your daughter?
she's 5.
Like when my
So
niece went from 10, like I had the best time with her. And then all of a sudden, like overnight, she just didn't want to talk to me and she became a different person. Right.
mm.
And so I don't know, you're the woman, I don't really understand it because boys don't do that till much old. Like, boys do it at 18.
Well, it's funny because
Girls do it at 13. Why?
I don't know, but even as a little person, like, it's very much the boys do this and the girls do that. I don't play with the boys' mum. I play with the girls, and then like there might be one boy that I let play in, because he likes Disney princesses or something. Because he's actually, so maybe that's good. Maybe she's moving towards being with men who are willing
Mm.
to boys who are willing
Yeah.
to
No,
devote
I
their
don't. I just think that there is,
lives.
the beauty of innocence, right? And then something happens, and what happens is us. We damage them, right? Because innocence is there, and then all of a sudden when they go to school, like everything is, as much as we think we're independent, we're not. Everything is coordinated. So you go to school, then all of a sudden a few kids start playing kiss chasey, and then all of a sudden everyone knows about kissing, and then that's how kids learn. It's
But
like
it happens earlier and earlier. Do you think it's got a lot to do with a bit of media and TV and
it's
whatever
got
as
no,
well?
it's just got to do with, I think, again, I know, please don't, I'm not being mean to parents, but I think that as, if we go back to the 60s and the 70s when I grew up, my mum was at home a lot of the time, right? I was
Yep.
around people.
Mine too.
And
Yep.
then as we got busier and busier, women and men went to work. And so kids were, so things changed. And that's why everything sped up because then electronics came and technology. And now here we are on social media. And so kids can see everything at school.
And they know everything.
They
Like,
know everything.
they know way more, and even in terms of, just curriculum or just understanding, like, they know about protons and things
Yeah.
like atoms that we like, I didn't know that till high school. It's
Yeah.
just a whole lot
I
more.
mean, like, does it make you uncomfortable knowing that the age that most kids have sex is young?
It really does make me
Or does it make you uncomfortable to know that the first thing that most girls do is oral sex and they do it at 11,
no,
12? Like, does that,
too old.
how do you navigate that part of it?
How
Because,
do you? I don't know. When you
well, do
work it
you,
out, tell me, because it petrifies me. I think we just have
well,
to,
this
well,
is
we
the
just have
thing,
to
isn't
make
it?
sure that we raise our sons and our
I
daughters
know, but this
to
is the
know
thing, Kim. So
about the sex.
I had sex at 12, right?
Wow,
And it's because I'm a boy.
the
I'm not,
last.
no, well, that was quite
That's what you
normal.
would call a woman, yeah,
That
but
was quite normal,
yeah.
like, 12 to 15. But,
Really?
like, the reality is that, I don't see that problem. But see, what you're doing now, and again, just tell me what you think. I'm not saying that you are exactly, but I feel like you're sort of worrying about what is the reason why we should be equal. Like you're worrying about your daughter when in reality, she's going to do what she does anyway. And the worry is what causes there to be no equality
Yeah,
because your daughter's going to
I
have
think
sex
it's
anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I
You
know that.
know, so why the worry? Can you see how the worry can sometimes, like, if you want us to be equal, like, see, my dad and my mum, they knew and they didn't care.
Yeah, and I can go there if she goes into that realm. I'll need a lot of therapy when that happens. But if she goes into that realm knowing that she deserves respect, not the ownership you were talking about before, she
Yeah, the
deserves to
ownership
be
was
on
more like
equal.
it's more the wedding paper.
Well, I don't know that it always is, though, is it? Like there is this thing that men just think that they deserve it and need it and whatever. So she needs to know that she has equal rights and that she can go in and navigate that space.
Yeah,
And I'm okay with it.
yeah, and that's what I meant by
That's
I
what
think.
I mean, that's what I'm worried about, that she
Yeah,
would ever feel,
yeah. I
pressured
think
to be
I
the weaker
think we're in
woman.
it now, though. That's the good thing for your daughter.
We're in what, that
Well,
shift.
there's a lot of talking about things like Tinder and all that, and about what's right, and about, it's not appropriate. There's a lot of talk. So as that continues, and by the time your daughter gets older, hopefully there's going to be a lot of shifts around that. Because the reality is that until this point, most, not all of them, but a lot of fathers would slap their sons on their back and say, "Good on ya." But if their
Mhm.
daughter did it, there's this anger or this. It's this weird thing. So again, I'm trying to challenge you to see that I think that we all have to change. Even the
Yeah,
way even
absolutely.
the way that you see your daughter, that has to change, because that's what causes the restrictions. Because if you're her mother and you're worried, then that sends an energy out that that's a worry. Then all of a sudden it becomes not equal.
But I'm worried about both of them, like,
Sure, but you know what I'm saying, right?
yeah.
It's like I'm not.
Yeah, I
I'm
do
not
what you I
saying
know what
you.
you mean. Yeah, yeah, I do know what you mean.
The only way it's going to change and everyone's treated equally is that we all have to accept the fact that, like, I'll give you an example. I was watching this show about Japan, right? Now, listen to this.
Mm,
When you turn 5 years old in Japan, right, there's
mm,
an exercise that parents do called the shop.
mm.
You're 5 years old, they give you money and they tell you to go into the streets of Japan on your own to buy noodles.
Yeah,
And
well,
it is a cultural coming of age.
yeah,
Now, I
yeah.
was watching that with anxiety because he's in the middle of this traffic and everything. But when he came back, he was so excited and he got confidence, right?
I'm excited if he didn't come back. Do they all
Now,
come back?
well, some kids don't go at all because they're too scared. And so that means that that tells you, and it gives you a blueprint of what they're going to be like growing up, either adventurous or they're going to be nervous or scared. And so it's just a cultural thing. But, it's the same thing, I think, with kids. I think parents have to either, my parents were really strict. So it meant that we did more bad things,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Like all the time, because
yeah,
we were so Catholic. Well, I looked at all my Aussie friends and they could do what they want, and I didn't understand that freedom. I didn't know what that felt like.
yeah. But they still did the same things that you did. They just didn't have to feel guilty about it.
Well, the mum would let them. Yeah, my boyfriend's sleeping
Yeah,
over, and nothing would be said. Oh my god, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just,
yeah,
it's just. So I think culture and all that comes to it. But if we really want to treat women or girls the same as boys, then we need to let them. We can't, like, put restrictions on them and call them names and say no. Like, how many parents or fathers will say no to a daughter but yes to a son?
yeah. Well, absolutely. I agree with that. It needs to be the same, and it needs. But yeah, but what you were saying before about the stories and the princesses and the Bibles and all those sorts of things. Um, that's going to be there forever, and that's something. It's a
Not
past,
really. It'll change. It'll change.
but it's a past worth honoring, I suppose, in some respects. And also, it's an interesting thing you say of, because it's a very fine line, isn't it? Like it should be okay that a girl wants to be a princess still too. We don't want to
I
pressure
know, but I
so
also,
much that
this
she's
is this is a
ashamed.
separate topic. But if you actually dig a little deeper, when you look deeper, Disney is actually not what you think. It's not like
Yeah,
this.
okay.
You
Yeah, I
know what
know
I
where you're
mean?
going. Let's save that for another day.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just not. I've got a question for you.
Okay.
So I want to know what you think. I know that you could see it on the news and in movies, but what do you women think that we talk about in the locker room? Or when we get into groups, like, remember last month thing, I didn't know what you talked about in the toilet, and I thought you went in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what do you think that what do you think that we're doing when we get together? Like, is there a mistrust, or do you roll your eyes and think they're idiots?
Well, I'm speaking for a big for a majority, obviously, I would say men in the locker room, in my
Well,
opinion.
in the locker room or the pub or when they get together.
Yeah, I've always felt, and I know I'm going to get cut down because I was way too nerdy on the last one and I copped flack for it. But I've always felt that men tend to get together, and because of what we're talking about now, they just talk about being men. Like it's not so much like
No,
we
don't
get
even talk
together.
about being men. Maybe they just talk about shit,
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Whereas when women get together, we sort of talk
the
about
emotions.
yeah, and well, whenever we sort of talk about our place with men, we don't just talk about, I really would like to get some time away from the kids to go play golf with you on Saturday or whatever. We don't have those sort of. So I guess when men get together by themselves, there's no fear or anything that we have. Maybe
No, but like, I think that when men start talking about women, if a woman walks into a room and they all go, riled up, I
mm,
think that's just an insecurity.
yeah.
It is an insecurity because
But that's a different thing that you're talking about. I know where you're going with that because
no, I'm talking about like when they go to it, like when they get together, it's just like talk about random stuff, but then someone or something shifts the energy, and then it's like everyone has to follow. And
yeah.
if they follow, that's when it becomes dangerous.
But do you think that I think this is a big thing that you're mentioning, the following, because we've spoken about this before, that pressure to be one of the boys, to and like I know, and I allude to my amazing husband who always speaks up for women, but I can see the struggle when you are in that position that you sort of expected to go with the boys, go down the boys.
Yeah.
What
Well, I think that you said something earlier that I really like, and I totally agree. And there needs to be more. I don't know. Maybe we need to have more forums or debates. But I think that a lot of people don't realize, like, again, I could be wrong. Okay, a woman I think looks forward to getting married and then wants children, right? And not all of them, but a majority, right? But I think for men, there's a psychological shift that no one talks about. Right, there's this psychological shift where you're a bachelor independent, and then all of a sudden everything changes. But
yeah,
we don't have the talk. Like we don't have a talk on that.
yeah,
So a lot of men are thrown into that, and it's really overwhelming.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
why
And
men.
again, that's about conditioning too, isn't it? Because we were conditioned to prepare for that. And
Well, it's also that there's been an undercurrent of like I think men have been told to shut up.
and
Like
not talk
either about emotions. There's this stupid saying, keep the wife happy. Something about
a
keeping the
happy
wife.
wife, happy life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like that's so stupid because it's
yeah.
basically telling someone to not to speak.
To not worry about your own happiness.
So that there's that, and then I think that's why men commit suicide. That's why there's so much pressure because they don't have. Now we're learning that it's a problem, and now people are talking about it through sports and all that. But
Yeah,
back in the 80s and 90s, like men didn't say anything. That's why, for example, if a man lost all the money in the bank,
yep.
he would jump off a building because the shame was
All of
so
that shame.
intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what has to change is that we need to give each other a break on how
I
we.
think you do, and with what you just said about having a child in a family and the change to a man's world, like I remember, and I've said it from the moment we had our first child, is I never actually really considered the impact it would have on my husband.
Well, the child
Um,
became the partner.
well, but also the freedom was taken. We used to be able to just do this, do that, and all of a sudden, a what? I can't just
Can I ask you, did you guys negotiate the child? Was it something that
pre-child.
no, when you had a child,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Was it something that you negotiated and talked about? Like, is it the right time? Should we do it now?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, so but not everyone does that, do they? So some
No,
men, so some
no.
men are just forced because the wife says I'm pregnant.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think more these days people, and I think that's why people are starting to have children a bit later in life as well, because they're sort of,
But doesn't that bring other problems?
oh yeah, a little bit,
Yeah,
yeah,
because I'm noticing a lot more women are not able to get pregnant, which
yeah,
is
absolutely.
causing this sort of this really sad. Like, I'm seeing it in clients, but it's a sadness.
And that's another whole thing because how does a man feel about that too when the woman can't get pregnant? That's if
Well, that's the sad thing. It's like some guys are good, but then some guys will leave
yeah,
because
yeah.
they want a child. Like, I shouldn't be saying.
Or feel a little bit I guess like like talking about this male push to be the provider, the strong one, you carry everything on your shoulders, and then you get your wife pregnant, and if you don't, well,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you?
Well, and then if you don't get boys, it's like this whole twisted thing. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of guys who have girls only, they struggle.
yeah,
Because
And I
how
guess,
am I going to
and
connect
that's
with
another
that?
thing worth talking about too, is this power. So we, as women, I think we've done a pretty good job in the home of starting to work a bit more, to bring a bit more of an income, to share the roles around. But there hasn't been the same build up for the men to accept what their role in that is, to
Well,
focus,
that's why I think
be
we're
at
in it
home a bit
now.
more.
I think we're in it now. And as well as we enter into a recession, as we come out of COVID, this is where we can adapt if we want to. Like really, if you look at successful couples,
Mm.
they don't have they're not insecure about money and about who's got what role. They're focused on how they can have a good life.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, but when you then come down the chain, like that's when it becomes hard.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
um, like I was going to ask you, this is just a random question, but like how do what do you think happens when there is an issue in the relationship? Say it could be intimacy, or it could be the child has got like a disability, or there's something that's not right and the bubble has burst. Do you think that men are capable of understanding that, or do you think that women have to hold that together? And it is an assumption.
Again, and again,
Just
like you keep prefacing in your answers, I have one of the good guys, so I don't, but I do know that it can be hard, because I think for some men, and I like, because we've had a couple of health issues with our children before, and I would safely say that I wouldn't have got through it without my husband's
mm,
incredible able to pick up the pieces and hold me and carry me there. But he's quite open to things that don't always work out for 100%. Whereas I think some men feel that perfection of the family life, of the picture. So when
yeah.
something like that happens, how do
Well,
they maintain
that's why people get divorced when there's a crisis.
Yeah, 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 because the picture's switched, hasn't it? You can't adapt your vision, and you
Yeah,
need to.
they can't sort of see a different outcome, or be just changed. Like so, it becomes too
Yeah, yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. And I guess, and having had children, any change in what you've expected, there is an element of grief that you have because of what you thought was going to happen. And like grief is something being taken from you that you put meaning to, that you're expecting a dream or a hope. And that goes with your children. Geez, that's a tight little mesh that you follow around. So little things like, oh, they can't get into that school. There can be a little bit of a grief in your family because of the expectation you had. You've always imagined Johnny going to whatever school.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I think it sounds like a silly thing, but I think as a family, that is why marriages break up, when things don't go the way you want them to go. Yeah.
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 All right, it's your turn.
Okay. Well, we've gone on a different tangent. I've got nothing about families, but
That's
anyway.
good.
Um, all right. You've been talking a lot about it's happening now and men are waking up. Yeah, that this
Yeah.
is starting to shift. So I want you to tell me, why are you saying that from a therapist's point of view? Or are you seeing evidence out there in the
N-
greater world?
I'm just seeing it from an evolution point of view.
And so tell me why you think they're wait. Like, what have you got to
Me
give us?
too.
Tell us.
Me too.
Oh, okay.
Me too has changed the whole world.
Yeah.
Like I mean, some men will be a bit naughty and will push it, but Me Too hasn't even started yet.
Okay.
Remember, like I do
I
think
think.
that there's the pedophile part. There's seen the things with the priests,
Yeah.
and so it's all men. Like I always wonder, where are the women? I know there's women out there that do that stuff too, but why do you think it's men? Like, what is it? Is it the chromosome thing? Like, why is it that men that are
That's the very good question. There's an entitlement, isn't it, that they're born with, that they can just do it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but I know that women do it too, right? So I know
Yeah.
of people that
Yeah.
have been sexually abused by a woman,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
it's just that is it a chemical thing, or is it the fact that like for example, in the church, I think that there was an acceptance, and people just turned a blind eye. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that sort of stuff is, and I think there's a lot of stuff that hasn't, I mean, there's so much stuff that's under that we don't know about.
Do you think from the this is to go on from that question, do you think that the reason things are changing is that men are now doing the work? So on the flip side of that, my argument is it's our time to do a bit of our work too.
Yeah, like I just think it doesn't don't go don't I don't think about that. I just think that things in society and things in life are shifting. So, when if you just go back 10 to 20 years, there were things that we wouldn't do, like that we would roll our eyes at, but we did it. Like the way that we spoke to women on television and all that, like Paul Hogan and all that wasn't that long ago on TV, right? So it's just, I think women have had enough. So that's good, right? Because we was, I think
That happened a long time ago with no
I
change.
know, but like but we know that it's going to take a while. It's not something that we can just shift. Like I would love to click my fingers and all of a sudden blacks are seen as equal. I would love that. And women, as a gay man, I've been through the change, like
Yeah,
in a way, like, like when I came out, I couldn't tell anyone because I was scared I'd be bashed. But like here we are and there's gay marriage now.
yeah,
So, that happened, but the thing that we did, and I'm not saying that we're better or anything, is that we fought.
yeah.
Mardi Gras, and we protests and we fought. So we wanted what we wanted. But like the funny thing is, right, as a gay man, I sometimes think that maybe we wanted something that it wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be.
Oh,
Because
really?
now, well, I just think I actually quite like the fact that we were sort of this kitsch undercover thing. Now it's like we're just common everyday people.
You just, oh, boring.
Like
Yeah,
I used to like all that sort of like secretive sort of stuff, but it's good. But like because now there's equal laws and all that. But when I say that, how do you feel about that? We fought. Like we would have Mardi Gras every year, which is sending a message. What do women do that besides talk about it? Like, do you think that you need to maybe up it a bit?
yeah. Well, this is the thing. I don't know.
Like
So
Me Too is that you upped it with Me Too.
yeah, and I feel like I feel a bit uneducated on the roles of women over time and all of the activism that's happened. So I'm probably speaking from a not enough information.
Well, that's the
But
thing
I would
about.
say that we have stepped up at many times, but have we been consistent enough?
Well, it's
Do we
like
know what we
how,
want?
yeah, it's like, for example, I think that it's all about suing people. It's all about action, like, law. Like, there's been a lot of there's been a lot of landmark moments.
Hmm.
Like there was the first woman that was, a judge, a lawyer or something, and she won a case on sexism.
Yeah,
The first, all those things have been landmarks. But I think that it's such a big thing. How do you go from there to there?
yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like it's the same with what I had to go through. Like, to get someone to like, people thought that you could get HIV from touching someone, which impacted my life because everyone that was gay had HIV, and
Yes.
so that was really, I used to be so scared. I used to cry every
Oh,
night. No, because it was terrible. Because every day you'd wake up and 5 people, 6 people would be dead.
yeah, yeah.
Right. So that was the journey. And I think you've got your journey, but I think that this is going to take time. And so it's the whole world.
But you think too, like, I don't know, it feels like it's been a problem for so long that we're just sort of thinking like it just needs to just happen. So maybe we're
I
too
know,
passive
but you
about
said
it. We
something before
fight a
though.
bit
You said something before that I think is the key to it. And that is you said that you accepted it. So there's
yeah,
been a lot of time in history that you burn your bra and you think that's a landmark, but you're
mhm.
right. What should have happened is that all women should have consistently pushed. But I think those milestones had to be celebrated.
And I also think that there's a it's a bit of a like when I say I accepted it, it's you accept some things and you don't accept others. So I guess it's not really it's not definitive. So if you let some things go, like your role as a mother at home, cleaning the house and whatever. Like, is that part of the fight? Do I need to fight for that when I'm actually quite okay with that bit of my role? Like, it's
Sure, but that, but
grey. There's
that,
grey areas,
you,
isn't there?
well, you want equality. So equality means that you don't have to do that anymore.
I know.
Just like the transgender thing is an important issue because
Yeah,
once upon a time, men that dressed up as women were seen as diseased, they had illness. But
yeah.
now we're seeing what it is. So it's becoming fluid, and that's what has to change. You don't need to be the person that runs to the kitchen when you get a guest,
No, I know.
but you
So, but,
do
but,
though.
so, but ultimately, it's a quest for us all, as you said before so beautifully, that for us just to be allowed to be ourselves.
Yeah. But
Like, that's
can we
it,
talk
isn't
about
it?
the sex thing? Because I think that's a really big thing. I think that is one of the big things. Like, as a woman, right? How do you like understand, say, for example, sex workers or strippers, right? Because they're doing something that you may not agree with. So how do you see that and reconcile that? Because part of that is part of the whole equation where women can be sex workers and there's no need to be shamed,
No.
but yet there is still that shaming part of it. So see how that little one step hasn't even
Yeah.
been fixed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine all the layers.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's the
So
same
what
with
do you see? What do you think about sex workers?
I don't have a problem with sex workers at all, except for when it's coming from a place where I feel bad for the sex worker because they're doing it out of desperation or
Okay, but
a
what
comfort.
about the sex worker that loves it and is making thousands and thousands of dollars?
I think it's brilliant. I don't have a
Okay.
problem with that.
How do
Um,
you think the rest of the women feel?
I think there would definitely be some women that are offended by it. Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
see,
And
that's the
particularly,
thing,
I
isn't it?
suppose if your partner was frequently in a place where there were sex workers, you might have a different perspective as well.
Yeah.
Um,
But,
yeah,
I do know that lately, probably the last decade or two, that, it's almost become as popular for women to see sex workers,
yeah,
like to
absolutely.
see
Yeah,
men, right?
yeah.
Like, and I'm going to be honest with you guys on this podcast. So when I got disabled, I went to a sex worker that was designed for disability. And, the whole stigma was there. But I have to tell you, like, it's like when you take away, I mean, besides the dirty men that just want to have sex,
Mm.
but the majority of people, men that go to them, there's a story.
Yes.
Most people that use sex workers have a story. Either they don't feel good enough, or they feel like there's a story, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we spend enough time listening to stories.
No,
I think we
absolutely.
just see the end result and go slut,
And
shame.
again, yeah, that's right. And again, like it's what makes somebody happy, isn't it? Like if there's
Yeah.
it would be the same for a male sex worker.
Yeah, but I always ask this question. Like, I talked about this with my family a lot. Like, because I want to know what they felt about the gay thing and all that. And so I say to them, "Okay, good, you're open. So how would you feel if your daughter was a sex worker?"
Yeah.
Because you can't all of a sudden be different just because your daughter wants to be one. The reality is that it's how we see people. So if, say, for example, I was a gay son and my mum and dad almost died, so
Mm,
they saw me as something broken. So
yeah,
it took ages to try and to show them that I'm just a normal human. So
yeah,
it's the same with all these other things. So
yeah.
that's where we haven't even started yet. We still have judgments and we still pigeonhole people. We still think that people that are homeless, it's not as good enough as people that are,
Well,
that's
but we
we have
do.
to start there though.
I think you're right, and I think judgment is the absolute key. Judgment and comparison when we don't just look at our um, own backyard and in our own self love and self worth. I suppose. I mean,
Yeah,
if you feel good in yourself, then you shouldn't have any judgment for anybody else, should you?
I
You're
know.
allowed to do
So
it.
do you think that's linked into the thing about for women that they have to see that and understand that so then they can, you said to me once that a lot of women don't go for things because they're scared of what's going to happen. Where that's where I think that we need to encourage women to go for jobs, even though they don't get it, but they need to keep pushing. And I really love the fact that they did that, say, with the flight attendants. Like they fought and they went to court and they won. They bet
Yeah,
Qantas,
yeah.
right? So I think there needs to be more of that. Like, why do you think there's not as much as that at the moment? Why do you think we're not fighting as much? Is it because we're so busy?
So busy to what? To not.
Well,
Yeah.
if you look at the suffragettes and you look at the flight attendants, you look at the bra burners, they were like sort of there was this massive group
Mm,
following, but I don't feel there's a group following with women
no, no,
today.
you're right. You're
Except for
right.
Me Too. Me Too did.
Yeah, they did. But do you think it's because perhaps because we are on the end of equality, so we sort of some of us are feeling
We're not
okay
the end.
that we're not standing
I
together?
think it's because what you said earlier. I
What
think
did
it's
I say?
because you said I think that we're in a time when we've accepted things
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit because things are good, right? Things are good for
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah, things are
Look
okay.
at your beautiful kitchen behind you. Things are
I know.
good.
Well, I mean, I put this here because I thought women needed to be in the kitchen, so I did it.
So, once upon a time it was hard. Life was a struggle.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And that's
So,
the thing. The biggest fight comes from a place of struggle, doesn't it? So
yeah.
not
So is
fighting
it
for
are
it
you
comes
feeling
from.
it's a struggle for you?
Not for me, no. But look, and I guess that's the thing too. I look around at some people that are struggling, and I sort of, I guess, I don't connect to it because I'm in a safe place, perhaps. And maybe we need to talk
How so can you give me an
more.
example of how they're struggling?
Well, women who are struggling with controlling partners who are,
And getting beaten up and all that, and like, yeah.
yeah, and other women who are struggling in relationships where they have, where they earn more than their partner does, and they're feeling really unsettled, and they're not sure if they can find somebody who will accept them
Mm,
for their success.
yeah.
So all of those sorts of things.
Can I ask you one more question
Yes,
quickly?
one more question because I'm going to have to go too.
I know. So I want to know, like, in history, how some well-known men are known to have like affairs or to have mistresses.
Mm.
Why do you think the women stay?
Oh, again, fear, and um, there's a
Is
greedy.
it fear, or is it also the fact that they want the lifestyle? Like if they, you know what I mean? Like it's such a big question in my head. Like, you know, they know that this person's having all these affairs. It's everywhere. There's all this gossip, but yet they stay, and it's
It's
like,
self-worth.
well,
Elevate.
I thought it could be also because they don't want to be alone, and they don't want to be like poor, so they'll just turn a blind eye.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right?
It is an interesting thing, and I think again, I think that's got to do with women feeling stronger in themselves, feeling that self-acceptance. You know, you're working hard at Secret Men's Business for self-acceptance, and that
Yeah.
we know what
But
we
do you also think that
and
we're
you know.
evolving and moving towards not being monogamous?
Oh gosh, that's a
That's
different
another one.
conversation. Exactly.
All right, all right. Let's say goodbye to everyone. I'm
Okay, thank you.
Joey.
And I'm Kim. Have
He's
a great
Kim,
day.
and we talked about equality. See you next time.
See you next
Bye.
time. Bye.